The cafeteria buzzed with the low hum of tired laughter and the metallic clatter of trays, the soundtrack of soldiers between missions. Major Zora Washington, her eyes ringed with exhaustion from 30 hours of command duty, sat alone at the edge of the officers' section, quietly stirring a cup of black coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. She wasn't there to socialize. She just needed food before her next debrief. The door swung open. 5 Navy SEALs entered, loud, confident, still smelling of adrenaline and gun oil. Their leader, Captain Jack Miller, scanned the room like he owned it. When he saw Zora, a black woman in an officer's uniform, sitting alone, his expression tightened. He stopped mid-step, smirked, and approached. "Ma'am," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "this section's for officers." His tone dripped with mock politeness. The other SEALs chuckled. Zora didn't look up immediately. She finished writing a line on the classified folder beside her tray before answering in a voice calm but edged with command. "I know. That's why I'm sitting here." Miller's grin faded slightly. "Oh? And what's your rank, Major?" he asked, the word heavy with sarcasm. She finally met his eyes, not with anger, but something far more dangerous: composure. "Major Zora Washington, Naval Intelligence, Special Operations Command." The room fell quiet. A fork clinked somewhere. Miller blinked, then forced a laugh. "Special Operations, you?" "I must have missed the memo about affirmative action for black women in Spec Ops." Zora's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "You must have missed a few memos, Captain." She paused, then continued, voice carrying across the cafeteria like a slow knife. "I ran the intelligence op that extracted your team from Yemen last month. The one where you took fire on your return route. Remember, I redirected air support when your coordinates were wrong. You're alive because I didn't follow your plan." The silence that followed was absolute. The SEALs behind Miller looked at her, then at him. Miller's jaw worked, but no sound came. Zora leaned back, calm, measured. "And since you're asking, yes, I'm in charge of your next deployment. So when you salute me next week, Captain, make sure you remember which section you're standing in." The entire cafeteria froze. The tension was electric. Humiliation, disbelief, and respect battling in the air. Then, like a scene scripted by fate, Admiral Teresa Chen walked in, saw Zora, and smiled. "Major Washington," she said warmly, "I heard about Yemen. Exceptional work." As Chen placed a reassuring hand on Zora's shoulder, the SEALs instinctively stood straighter. Miller lowered his gaze, but what no one saw, not even Zora, was the shadow standing in the doorway. Colonel Robert Hayes, Director of Joint Special Operations Intelligence. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned cold. That was the moment he decided she had to be silenced. The next morning, the base was drenched in the sterile light of order, drills, salutes, and routines that masked the quiet politics beneath. Major Zora Washington walked briskly across the corridor of Naval Command South, uniform crisp, eyes sharper than usual. Her coffee sat untouched in her hand. She wasn't tired. She was alert. Something about yesterday had unsettled her, and not because of Captain Miller's arrogance. It was the look from Colonel Robert Hayes, brief, calculated, like a man measuring a threat he couldn't afford to ignore. Zora's office was small, quiet and secure, one of the few places where she could breathe. She slid her ID into the terminal, the machine humming to life. As the encrypted system unlocked, a classified folder blinked on her screen. Operation Rainfall, Level 6 access. Her clearance allowed Level 5. She frowned. Level 6 meant restricted to directors only, but someone had forgotten to revoke her proxy clearance from the Yemen extraction mission. For a moment, she hesitated, then clicked. What unfolded on the screen made her heart tighten. Field reports altered, satellite timestamps manipulated. Her operation logs, the ones that proved she'd saved Captain Miller's team, had been tampered with. The changes made it look as if the intelligence had come from Hayes' department, not hers. Someone was erasing her. She leaned closer, scrolling line after line. Then she saw it, a hidden attachment. She decrypted it and opened a video feed. It showed Colonel Hayes, late night in his office, speaking to a shadowed figure via secure comms. "She's getting too visible," Hayes said. "Washington's a problem. She's got eyes in everything. If we keep letting her climb, someone's going to start asking how we lost the funds from Phantom Supply." The voice replied, "Then handle it quietly." Hayes nodded. "Understood." Zora sat back, pulse steady but furious. Phantom Supply. That was the code name for a logistics network she'd flagged months ago. Millions in unaccounted equipment. She hadn't realized it went this high. She copied the file to an encrypted drive, slid it into her jacket, and powered down the system. Within minutes, she was walking toward the exit, every sense heightened. The hallway suddenly felt too long, too exposed. 2 MPs passed by, both white, both glancing her way longer than necessary. She nodded politely, not breaking stride. When she reached her car, a voice called from behind. "Major Washington!" She turned. Captain Jack Miller stood there, his expression conflicted. Not the arrogant sneer from yesterday, but something else. Guilt, respect, maybe. "Ma'am," he said awkwardly, "about yesterday, I was out of line." "You were," she said simply. He exhaled, nodding. "Look, I didn't come to apologize for PR. I came because someone's asking about you. Hayes has been making rounds, and it's not friendly. If you've got something on him, you need to be careful." Zora studied him for a beat. "Why are you warning me?" "Because I've seen men like him," Miller said quietly, "and because I owe you my life." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time saw a soldier beneath the ego. "Then stay out of this, Captain," she said. "It's not your fight." Miller's jaw tightened. "Maybe not. But I know a battlefield when I see one." Zora said nothing. She started the car, the hum of the engine low and controlled. As she pulled out of the lot, she glanced at the flash drive tucked in her jacket pocket. It was small, insignificant, but it held the kind of truth that could destroy careers or save lives. In the rearview mirror, she caught sight of a black SUV pulling out from the shadows behind her. Unmarked, tinted windows, her lips curved slightly. Not fear, not surprise. Just recognition. "So it begins," she murmured. And as the bass disappeared behind her, the woman they thought they could silence had already started her counterattack. Rain started to fall just after midnight, soft, steady, deliberate, as if the night itself was trying to cover what was about to happen. Major Zora Washington drove without headlights through the back roads outside Norfolk, the rhythmic hum of the tires almost soothing against the storm. The flash drive in her pocket felt heavier than any weapon she'd ever carried. She knew what it contained could dismantle a whole command chain and make her a target before dawn. She reached an abandoned airfield once used for drone testing, one of the few places still, outside military jurisdiction. Inside an old maintenance hangar, she connected the encrypted drive to a personal laptop, one she never used on base. As the files opened, lines of data scrolled across the cracked screen, falsified requisitions, off-book shipments, and private accounts under civilian aliases. It wasn't just Colonel Hayes. The list included names from procurement, logistics, even one senator on the Armed Services Committee. Her heart beat once, heavy. This isn't corruption, she thought. It's a network. She copied everything onto a new drive, then initiated a self-destruct protocol on the terminal. As she waited for the data to wipe, her phone vibrated. An unknown number, secure line. She hesitated, then answered. "Major Washington." "This is Admiral Teresa Chen," came the calm voice. "We need to talk." "You're in danger." "I'm aware," Zora said, voice steady. "No, you don't understand. Hayes just filed an official report. He's accusing you of espionage and data theft." "They're coming for you," Zora's eyes narrowed. "How long before they find me?" "Minutes," Chen said grimly. "I'll stall the order, but you need to move now." "Do not return to base," the line cut. For a split second, everything was silent, until she heard the faint crunch of tires outside the hangar. 2 black SUVs, same as the one that tailed her before. Headlights off, doors opening softly. She killed the lights, grabbed her jacket, and slipped behind a stack of rusted barrels. The rain grew louder, masking the footsteps, but she could hear them clearly, trained, methodical, synchronized. Private contractors, she realized, not MPs. Hayes hired civilians to make this vanish quietly. A flashlight beam swept the hangar. Zora moved low, her breathing steady. One of the men stepped closer, voice low and mocking. "Major Washington." "You shouldn't have looked where you weren't invited." She didn't answer. When the man turned his back, she moved, and fast and silent. A brief struggle, a muffled grunt, and he was down. She took his sidearm, slid behind a column, and fired 2 clean shots toward the entrance. The other men ducked for cover. The echo cracked through the rain. Outside, engines revved. One of the SUVs peeled off. She sprinted to her car, the drive clutched in her hand. Bullets shattered the rear glass as she sped into the dark. The storm swallowed the road ahead. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Admiral Chen. "You can't fight this alone. Go to Safe House Echo, coordinates sent. Bring the evidence." Zora's grip tightened on the wheel. She didn't trust anyone now, not Command, not the Navy, maybe not even Chen. But she had no other choice. The only way to survive was to expose everything. As she drove through the storm, a memory surfaced, her father's voice, a Marine who'd taught her that silence was sometimes the sharpest weapon. "They'll always underestimate you, Zora. Let them." "That's how you win." She allowed herself a small smile. "Guess we're back at war, Dad." Lightning flashed across the horizon, illuminating the road ahead, slick, narrow, and leading straight into the unknown. Behind her, the second SUV reappeared. Its headlights flared, closing in fast. She pressed harder on the accelerator, the roar of the engine drowning the thunder. The chase had begun. And this time, it wasn't a mission sanctioned by Command. It was survival, justice, and war rolled into one. The rain hadn't stopped by the time Major Zora Washington reached the outskirts of Chesapeake. The sky hung low, swollen with thunder, the world around her reduced to a blur of headlights and water. Her wipers groaned across the windshield as she followed the GPS coordinates Admiral Chen had sent. Each turn led her deeper into the woods. No houses, no lights, just the hum of her engine and the whisper of wind against the trees. Finally, she saw it. An old farmhouse half swallowed by fog, its windows dark. A faint blue light blinking in the distance, a signal beacon. She parked 200 feet away and approached on foot, boots sinking into the wet mud, one hand resting on the pistol at her hip. Inside, the air was dry and cold. The lights flickered on automatically, motion sensors. The place looked abandoned, but on the table lay a folder marked Echo 12. She opened it and froze. Inside were photos, her entering the restricted database, her leaving the base, her car, her face, every movement from the last 24 hours, time-stamped and labeled. At the bottom of the file, one word was stamped in red. Asset. Zora's breath slowed. Not target. Asset. A voice came from behind her. "I told you to get here quickly." She turned sharply, gun raised. Admiral Teresa Chen stood in the doorway, unarmed, wearing civilian clothes, her face pale in the dim light. "You've been monitoring me," Zora said, tone flat. Chen nodded. "We had to. You were under review months before Hayes made his move. He's not the only one being watched." Zora's grip tightened slightly. "Then what is this?" "Why help me now?" Chen stepped forward slowly. "Because Hayes isn't working alone. The operation you uncovered, Phantom Supply, funds covert missions outside congressional oversight. It's been active for years. You stumbled onto it when you rerouted Miller's extraction. That's why he wants you erased." Zora studied her for a moment. "And where do you stand, Admiral?" "I'm standing on the line between law and silence," Chen replied. "But I can't cross it without evidence." "You have the drive." Zora hesitated, then reached into her jacket and tossed the small encrypted drive onto the table. "You'll find everything you need. It's enough to bring down half the procurement command." Chen picked it up carefully. "Good. Then we'll do this by the book." Before Zora could respond, the windows shattered. 2 flashbangs rolled across the floor. The explosion of light and sound hit like a hammer. Zora dove behind the table, pulling Chen down with her. Gunfire tore through the room, splinters flying. Voices outside. Tactical, trained, efficient. Hayes's men had found them. Chen crawled toward the side door, shouting, "There's a tunnel under the back shed! Go!" Zora covered her, firing 2 precise shots through the window. One of the attackers fell. The others ducked for cover. Smoke filled the air. Chen reached the hatch and yanked it open. "Move!" They slid down into darkness, a narrow underground tunnel leading into the woods. The air smelled of dirt and oil. Zora's lungs burned, ears still ringing from the blast. Above them, footsteps pounded the floorboards. Hayes's voice echoed faintly. "Find them! Burn the place down." They ran until the tunnel opened into a clearing. The storm had broken. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy and wet. In the distance, the farmhouse glowed orange as fire swallowed it. Zora turned back, eyes narrowing. "That drive better have duplicated itself." Chen nodded, breathing hard. "It did. It's uploading to a secure server." Zora smirked. "Then Hayes just lit his own funeral pyre." Chen looked at her, something between admiration and concern in her eyes. "You're not going to stop, are you?" Zora shook her head. "Not until every name on that list stands where I did. On trial, not in uniform." They started walking toward the tree line, the fire's glow fading behind them. Dawn was breaking over the Atlantic, streaking the clouds in red and gold. Zora pulled her jacket tighter and murmured almost to herself, "Different battlefield, same war." And somewhere beyond the trees, a helicopter's rotor began to spin, not chasing them this time, but waiting for them. The helicopter ride was short, rough, and silent. Major Zora Washington sat beside Admiral Teresa Chen, both still streaked with soot from the safehouse fire. Through the window, dawn crept over the Atlantic, thin bands of orange light cutting through the clouds like quiet promises. They landed on an isolated Navy facility along the coast, one that looked abandoned but wasn't. 2 guards in plain clothes escorted them to an underground briefing room. Chen keyed in a code. The reinforced door slid open to reveal a sleek operations chamber humming with low power. Screens, encrypted channels, and 3 people waiting inside. Zora immediately recognized one. General Avery Locke, head of Strategic Command, the same man who once saved Dr. Elijah Carter's career years ago. His face was older now, but his eyes still had the same weight of command. "Major Washington," Locke greeted her. "You've caused quite a stir." Zora stood straight. "I exposed corruption. The stir caused itself." Chen gave Locke a look. "She has the evidence, sir. Every transaction, every false requisition. Hayes wasn't just stealing. He was funding private paramilitary operations overseas." Locke nodded grimly. "We suspected as much. The problem is, the moment we move against him, the leak could spread. He's got connections all the way to Capitol oversight. We need precision and silence," Zora frowned. "You're asking me to stay quiet again?" "Not quiet," Locke said. "Strategic." He pointed to the screen, live satellite footage of Hayes's estate in Virginia, heavily guarded. "We intercept him tonight. But we need someone who knows how he operates, someone he'll never expect to see coming." Zora realized what he meant. "You want me to lead the operation?" Chen folded her arms. "You're the only one who can. Hayes knows every other name in the command chain." Zora exhaled slowly. "Then I'll need a team." Locke smiled faintly. "Already handled." The door opened again. 4 soldiers entered. Among them, Captain Jack Miller, the same man who'd once humiliated her in the cafeteria. He stood at attention, eyes steady. "Major," he said quietly. Zora studied him, then nodded. "You still owe me your life, Captain." "And I plan to keep paying," Miller replied. Hours later, under the black cover of night, their chopper cut across the Virginia countryside. The rain had returned. Fitting, Zora thought. Some storms never really ended. They just changed names. Her comms crackled in her ear. "Team Echo, status check." "Echo 1 in position," Miller's voice came back. "Thermal confirms 6 hostiles outside, 2 inside." Zora crouched near the tree line, watching through her night vision scope. Hayes's mansion glowed faintly, lights flickering behind bulletproof windows. The arrogance of power was always easy to spot, too clean, too calm. She gave the signal. The team moved, In less than 3 minutes, the perimeter guards were down, silencers coughing into the rain. Zora slipped through the back entrance, pistol drawn, her heartbeat steady. In the main hall, Hayes stood at his desk talking on the phone. He didn't even flinch when she entered. "Washington," he said without turning. "You should have stayed hidden." "I learned that from you," she replied, voice even. "Only difference is, I know when to step into the light." He turned slowly, calm as a man who still believed he held every card. "You think this ends with me? You think a few files can undo decades of business? You'll be buried before the story even runs." Zora took a step closer. "Maybe, but you'll be buried first." Before he could respond, she dropped a small transmitter on his desk. The light blinked green. In command, Chen and Locke watched as the data stream opened. Hayes' private server transferring to their system in real time. Hayes glanced at the blinking light, realization dawning. "You think you can—" A door burst open. Miller and his team stormed in, weapons trained. "Hands where we can see them!" Hayes hesitated, a flicker of defiance, then reached for his drawer. Zora didn't hesitate. A single shot echoed through the hall. Hayes fell backward, the gun clattering from his hand. Silence followed. Locke's voice came through the comms. "Clean extraction. Get out before his men regroup." Zora holstered her weapon. "Understood." As they left, Miller walked beside her. "You didn't even flinch?" She looked ahead. "When you've seen enough war, pulling a trigger is the easiest part. Living with it. That's the mission." By morning, headlines flooded every network. Colonel Robert Hayes under investigation for treason and corruption. Operation Phantom Supply exposed. Pentagon launches internal audit. In a quiet office far from the chaos, Admiral Chen poured 2 cups of coffee. "To justice," she said, handing one to Zora. Zora raised an eyebrow. "To survival," she corrected softly. Chen smiled. "You think it's over?" Zora stared out the window, watching sunlight finally break through the clouds. "It's never over. But at least now, they know I don't stay silent." As she turned to leave, Chen called after her. "What will you do now?" Zora paused in the doorway. "What I was trained to do," Chen tilted her head. "And what's that?" Zora smiled faintly. "Win wars no one admits exist." Outside, the wind carried the scent of salt from the ocean, calm, clean, but heavy with memory. For the first time in weeks, she let herself breathe. "Different battlefield," she murmured. "Same mission." It had been 3 months since the night Colonel Hayes fell. The headlines had cooled. The Pentagon had issued its statement, and the world, as it always did, moved on. But inside the quiet halls of Naval Intelligence Command, Major Zora Washington knew better. Wars didn't end when the shooting stopped. They just changed shape. She sat alone in her new office, smaller, cleaner, stripped of any ornament except a single framed photo, her father, in uniform, saluting under a rain-soaked flag. Outside the window, dawn broke over the Potomac, pale light cutting through fog like a hesitant truth. The door opened softly. Captain Jack Miller stepped in, holding a manila folder. "Morning, ma'am," he said. "Got something you'll want to see." Zora looked up from her screen. "If it's another debrief from Internal Affairs, tell them I'm done talking about Hayes." Miller shook his head. "It's not Hayes, it's what comes after him." He slid the file across the desk. Inside were blurred satellite photos, convoys, unmarked planes, movement through Eastern Europe. "These routes shouldn't exist," Miller said. "Phantom Supply is gone, but someone's already rebuilding it. Different name, same structure, same players." Zora leaned back, her eyes narrowing. "Corruption's like a virus. You cut off one limb, it grows another." Miller nodded grimly. "There's one more thing. Whoever's behind this, they're using your clearance. Your name is on the authorizations." For a moment, the room seemed to still. "They're framing me again," Zora said quietly. "Only this time it's cleaner." Before Miller could answer, her secure line blinked. "Admiral Teresa Chen." Zora hit the receiver. "Admiral," Chen's voice was low, urgent. "Zora, we've got a problem. Someone leaked the full Phantom file to the press, including your classified field report. It looks like you authorized Black Ops under your command." Zora's jaw tightened. That's impossible. I know. But Washington wants someone to blame. Zora closed the folder and stood. Then I guess it's time to find whoever's using my name. That night, the city glowed cold and distant. Zora met Chen and Miller at a safe house outside Arlington, the same one she'd thought burned months ago, now rebuilt and under heavier guard. Inside, a holographic projection flickered to life, data streams tracing transactions across continents. Chen pointed to a blinking node in the network. That's the source, Zurich. But every transfer ends here. She tapped a final point on the screen. Langley, Virginia. CIA? Miller said. Chen's expression didn't change. Not officially. Zora studied the web of connections, her mind racing. It wasn't about one man, one operation. It was systemic, an invisible hand feeding the machine she'd spent her life serving. We've been cleaning one room in a burning house, she murmured. Miller looked at her. Then what's the plan? Zora's eyes hardened. We stopped playing defense. 2 weeks later, at 0300 hours, Zora walked through the halls of a high-security intelligence substation in Langley, escorted by 2 guards who didn't know who they were walking beside. She carried a briefcase containing nothing but a flash drive and a single command: trace every name, every shell company, every false clearance. When she reached the main terminal, she swiped her ID and began the upload. The system hummed, layers of encryption unfolding like dominoes. One by one, files opened, cross-linked, exposed. The monitors filled with names: contractors, senators, lobbyists, men and women who'd turned war into a business. The network pulsed red, and as alarms began to blare, Zora simply whispered, "Let the truth breathe." Miller's voice came over her comms. "Ma'am, you tripped the firewall. They'll trace it back to you in minutes." "I know," she replied, calm as stone. "Just make sure the world sees it first." She ejected the drive, pocketed it, and turned for the exit. Guards flooded the corridor. "Major Washington," one shouted. "Stand down!" But Zora kept walking. Her steps were measured, deliberate, like a soldier on parade, not a fugitive. By the time they reached her, the data was already gone, transmitted to every major network on the globe. By morning, the news had broken again. Pentagon insider leaks hidden war profiteering files, systemic corruption exposed. The photo of Zora, walking calmly between armed guards, was everywhere. Some called her a traitor. Others called her the bravest officer alive. In a small office overlooking the sea, Admiral Chen watched the coverage in silence. Miller entered quietly. "They're calling her the Silent Rebellion." Chen smiled faintly. "She's not rebelling. She's restoring balance." He looked out at the horizon. "Think she'll make it?" Chen didn't answer for a long time. Then softly, "Women like her don't disappear. They become the reason others stand." Weeks later, deep in the mountains of Montana, a woman sat alone in a cabin lit by the fire. The world thought she was gone, detained, erased. But Zora Washington was still here, watching, waiting. On her desk lay an old Navy coin engraved with her father's words, "Honor above all." She turned it over once, then whispered into the quiet, "They built their wars on silence. Now silence fights back." She looked out the window, the snow falling in steady rhythm, and smiled. Different battlefield, same mission. Snow covered the cabin roof like a blanket of silence. Zora Washington sat by the fire, laptop open, the glow reflecting in her eyes. 3 months had passed since the leak. The world had changed, quietly, not loudly. Investigations were underway, resignations piling up, whispers turning into confessions. She had no medals now, no rank, no country to salute. But she had something rarer, proof that one voice, even in exile, could still shake the powerful. A secure message blinked on her screen. From a Miller text. "They're rebuilding oversight. They're naming it after you, the Washington Reform Act." Zora smiled faintly. "They'll forget the name," she murmured, "but not the lesson." Outside, the wind howled softly through the pines. She stood, tossing another log into the fire, the flame catching and rising like a quiet anthem. "Different battlefield," she whispered. "Same mission." And as the firelight danced against the window, her reflection looked back, calm, resolute, unafraid. A soldier without a uniform, but still standing guard over the truth. Spring returned to the mountains slowly, melting the snow, uncovering the earth, and with it, the traces of the life Major Zora Washington had built in exile. The cabin was quiet as ever. Her only companions the rustle of trees and the occasional distant hum of a helicopter that never came close. She'd grown used to solitude. It wasn't punishment. It was peace earned through fire. Every morning she followed the same routine: coffee at dawn, a run through the misty trail, and an hour scanning encrypted channels. Though her name had vanished from the Navy registry, whispers of her legacy hadn't. The Washington Reform Act had passed. Oversight committees now audited military spending quarterly, and for the first time, whistleblowers were protected, not silenced. But she knew the system's wounds were deep. Healing it would take generations, not one soldier's sacrifice. One morning, as the sun broke through the pines, Zora received a package with no return address. Inside was a medal, her Medal of Valor, tarnished but intact, along with a note in familiar handwriting. For the one who fought wars no one saw. TC. She stared at it for a long moment, fingers brushing the cool metal. Then quietly, she placed it back in the box. "I didn't fight for medals," she said under her breath. Later that evening, Captain Jack Miller appeared at her doorstep, older, thinner, but smiling. "You really disappeared," he said, stepping into the light. "Not really," she replied. "Just stopped being visible." "They cleared your name," he said softly. "You could come back. Train new officers, run intel. The Navy needs people like you again." Zora shook her head. "They need people who never become me. People who don't have to choose between truth and loyalty." They sat outside, watching the sunset burn the horizon gold. Miller finally broke the silence. "You think it was worth it?" Zora considered that. "Justice isn't about winning. It's about keeping the line steady, even when everyone else steps back." As the last light faded, she reached into her pocket and took out her father's coin, the one engraved "Honor Above All." She turned it over slowly, feeling its weight. Then she handed it to Miller. "Keep it," she said. "The next fight won't need soldiers like me. It'll need men who remember why we fought at all." He nodded, eyes misting. "What will you do now?" Zora smiled, the kind of smile that belonged to someone who had seen too much yet still believed in something better. "Live," she said simply. "And listen." When he left, the night settled around her like an old friend. The stars blinked quietly overhead. No spotlight, no orders, no war. Just the steady rhythm of peace. She sat by the dying fire, whispering one last time, as if the world could still hear her across the distance. Different battlefield. Same mission. And as the embers faded into the dark, her reflection disappeared in the window. Not erased, but finally free.